Before every great idea, there was a question. Before every awakening, a shadow. Welcome to One Page at a Time, where we explore a single thought that could change everything. Plotinus The Enneads. What is the living being and what is the human being? Pleasures and pains, feelings of fear and boldness, appetites and aversions and feelings of distress. To what do these belong? In fact, they belong either to the soul or to a soul using a body or to some third thing that arises from a combination of these. And this can be understood in two ways, either as a mixture or as something different that arises from the mixture. It is the same for what arises from these states, namely actions and beliefs. So, then, we must investigate discursive thinking and belief to determine whether they belong to that to which the states belong, or whether some of them are like this and some are not. And we should also reflect on how acts of intellection occur and to what they belong, and indeed what is the thing which is itself considering the investigation of these questions and making the judgment. But before that, we should ask, what is the subject of sense perception? It is appropriate to begin from there, since the above states are either acts of sense perception or else they do not occur without sense perception. First, we need to understand if it is the case that soul is one thing and the essence of soul another. For if this is so, soul will be something composite, and there will at once be nothing absurd in its being the subject, of these kinds of states and, in general, of better and worse habits and dispositions, that is, assuming the argument will turn out this way. In fact, however, if soul and the essence of soul are identical, soul would be a certain form incapable of being subject of all these activities that it imparts to something else, but would have the activity that is natural to itself in itself, whatever the argument reveals this to be. In this case, it will be true to say that the soul is immortal. If indeed that which is immortal and indestructible must be incapable of being affected, it would somehow give what belongs to itself to another, while receiving nothing from anything else, or only so much as is present in the things prior to itself, things from which it is not cut off, since they are superior to it. That which is immortal and indestructible must be incapable of being affected. It would somehow give what belongs to itself to another while receiving nothing from anything else, or only so much as is present in the things prior to itself, things from which it is not cut off, since they are superior to it. Now what would something of this sort fear, since it is not subject to anything outside it? So, that which is afraid is that which is capable of being affected. So, it does not feel courageous either, for how can courage belong to those things to which what is fearful cannot be present? And how can it have appetites, which are satisfied by means of the emptied body being filled up, since that which is emptied and filled up is different from it? And how could soul be the product of a mixture? In fact, its essential nature is unmixed. How could other things be introduced into it? If this were to occur, it would be on the way to not being what it is. Being distressed is even more remote from it, for how can something be pained except in regard to something? But that which is simple in substantiality is self-sufficient, inasmuch as it is stable in its own substantiality. And will it be pleased if something is added to it when there is nothing, not even any good, that can augment it? For what it is always. Further, it will perceive nothing, nor will there be discursive thinking or belief in it. For sense perception is taking on a form or also a corporeal state, and discursive thinking and belief supervene on sense perception. Regarding intellection, if we are going to understand this as being in soul, we should examine how this happens, and regarding pleasure, pure pleasure, whether it has this when it is by itself. But as for the soul that is in the body, we should also examine whether it exists prior to this or only in this, since it is from the combination of body and soul that the entire living being is named. If, then, on the one hand it uses the body as an instrument, it does not have to be the subject of states that come through the body, just as craftsmen are not the subjects of the states of their instruments. On the other hand, perhaps it would necessarily be a subject of sense perception, if indeed it must use this instrument for cognizing the states arising from sense perception of what is external. Seeing is, after all, the use of the eyes. But there are injuries associated with seeing, so that there are also pains and distress, as is generally the case for everything that happens to the body. So too, there are appetites in the soul seeking care for this instrument. But how will the states go from the body into the soul? For though body will transfer its own states to another body, how will body transfer anything to the soul? For this would be equivalent in a way to saying that when one thing experiences something, another thing experiences it. For so long as what uses the instrument is one thing, and the instrument it uses is something else, each is separate at least. Anyone who posits the soul as using the body separates them. As I sit with the words of Plotinus, I find myself drawn inward, not toward the emotions that usually stir within me, but toward the quiet center beneath them. He asks, "To whom do pleasures and pains belong? To the soul? To the body? To something in between?" It's a question that unravels me. I've always assumed that what I feel is what I am, that when I'm afraid I am fear, when I hurt I am pain, when I crave I am desire. But what if I am none of those things? What if those are merely shadows cast upon the surface of something deeper, something far more stable? Plotinus suggests that the soul is not the recipient of experience, but the giver of it, untouched, unaffected, even by suffering, that it merely uses the body like a craftsman uses a tool. And if that is true, then I must ask, when I suffer, who is it that suffers? When I tremble in fear or burst into laughter, who is the one observing these things unfold? Maybe my identity has been too closely tied to the fluctuations of my body and mind. Maybe the essence of who I am has been hiding in plain sight, not in the chaos, but in the silent awareness of it. What if the soul, in its true nature, doesn't flinch when the body breaks? What if it doesn't hunger when the stomach growls? What if it simply watches, perfectly still, as the play of life dances across the stage of flesh and thought? And that thought both frightens me and comforts me, because it means that the deepest part of me, the part untouched by circumstance, might be invulnerable, not cold or distant, but utterly whole. It means that I don't have to chase joy or avoid pain to find peace. I only have to stop identifying with what I feel. There's something profoundly liberating in that, to know that beneath every storm there is a sea that never moves. To realize that I am not the waves, I am the depth beneath them. It doesn't mean I stop caring. It doesn't mean I stop living. It means I start living from a place that can't be shaken. And so I return to that question: what is the human being? Maybe it is not what we do or what we feel, but what we are when all else is stripped away. A presence, a light, a stillness that gives without taking, that exists beyond harm, beyond change, beyond time. A soul untouched. And perhaps that's enough.